Now for the next 10 minutes we have an encore for Connor to discuss the last issue, which is, again, I'll let you describe it, but basically using rental properties and so forth. Connor.
So this is actually a way that you can legally do what Representative Oda just told you to break the law. That is, tell different legislators that you're their constituent. You rent a home on a short-term basis in their district for a night, and while you're there, you can email them. They're your senator or representative for a day. Anyway, so short-term rentals, Tom wanted me to throw this in here at the end, so this is going to be a very brief synopsis. This is about Airbnb and VRBO. They're now called HomeAway. These are two companies that do what's called short-term rentals. So if you go on vacation anywhere, rather than staying at a hotel, you can rent someone's basement or a room or the entire house. Or like we did when we went up to the lake this summer with the whole big family reunion, we rented a whole big cabin. It was amazing. And our kids love it because we get a kitchen and we get a playground in the backyard, and it's a home environment rather than a stale, nasty hotel room, right? So the problem here is that Utah likes to claim that it supports the free market when it actually doesn't. So our state constitution, which I call a document that is both uninspired and uninspiring, nevertheless, there's a provision of the Utah Constitution that says that it is the policy of the state of Utah that a free market shall be required. It's like the only good thing about the whole document. It has this beautiful gem in there. And so it says we require the free market. And yet year after year after year, we run into these issues here in Utah where the free market is violated. So you heard about the Tesla battle, right? You can't even buy a Tesla in Utah. Zenefits, an innovative HR insurance company, they were illegal for a while. Uber and Lyft, right? Like the taxi kind of cars. Uber and Lyft were completely banned in Salt Lake City till the legislature finally came in and fixed it. Time and time and time again, we have these situations where the market is being violated in a state where it's constitutionally required to have a free market. And so the latest one is Airbnb and VRBO. Rather than having pricey hotels, being able to stay in someone's home, being able to have a market where a provider of a good or service and a consumer can come together. Now, this has been done for years, especially during the Olympics. There were people just on a short-term basis renting a home for a little bit. But with the internet and what's called the sharing economy and an app on your phone, you can now say, oh, hey, I'm flying into Chicago tonight. Hey, I'm going to stay at this guy's home. He's got 5 stars. It's super cheap. It's available tonight. Boom. I just rented his home for the night. And then he emails me instructions on the keypad how to get in the home, and there you go. So apps and the internet have really facilitated buyer and seller coming together, right? Now, here's the issue. In Utah, many city governments ban you from doing this with your home. So you think you have property rights? I'm sorry to tell you, you actually don't. We've been working on property rights quite extensively the past couple of years at Libertas, and as we talk with attorneys who work in this arena, land use attorneys, to every single one has said some variant of, your neighbors have more right to control your property than you do. Every single one. Why? Because cities have granted unto themselves what's called plenary power, unrestrained power, local control. Total control to do whatever they want with zoning and land use ordinances and dictate how property can be used. So what this means is they'll say, okay, in Lehigh, where I'm from, we have permitted uses. This is how you can use your property in a single-family residential zone. And then we'll have conditional uses, where if you fill out the permit and pay the money and everything, then you can use your property that way. And then everything that is not permitted or conditionally approved is prohibited. And here's the issue that we're running. Short-term rentals in almost every city in the state of Utah are not listed in the land use ordinances. Bureaucrats 50 years ago, when they came up with these ordinances, did not have the foresight, right, to predict short-term rentals being a thing that people cared about and did. So of course it's not in the land use ordinances. So by default, in most cities, you are prohibited from renting your room to somebody else for a night, for a week, or whatever. Simply because it's not permitted under the land use ordinances. I'm going to bump questions to the Q&A session right after, just because I've got like 4 minutes, so I got to get through a couple things really quick. So, What we've tried to do legislatively, let me back up for a quick moment. Why is this an issue? I can have my mom come and spend the night. I can have a college student over for a week. I can have grandma come and kick it at my house for a couple days and things are great. She'll bake me brownies, okay? Not pot brownies. We're not talking marijuana. She is from Colorado. No, I'm just kidding. So I feel horrible because I'm always the one making fun of people who make those stupid jokes, and I just made a joke. All right. Nonetheless, so now people who object to Airbnb and these short-term rentals do it because they fear what's going to be done. Oh, a party is going to happen, and there'll be garbage everywhere, and cars, and everything else. And because of that fear and speculation, they violate the property rights of the individual. And yet no one objects to the right of a property owner, a homeowner, to allow someone to come and stay in their home, their basement, their bedroom, or whatever, without compensation. Right? If it's my grandma or a homeless person or whoever, 0 people in the entire state will object to your right to share your home with whoever you want for as many nights as you want. But the second that money is exchanged, suddenly it's now a commercial transaction that brings you under the whole regulatory power of the city, and they deny everything. Even though the burden on your neighbors from doing this activity is no different. Whether money is exchanged or not, if you have someone stay over for 3 nights and they have a car parked there, the burden, perceived burden on the property owner adjacent to you or down the road is no different. So that's our pitch. Let's talk about actual use of the property. Let's talk about actual public safety and health. Let's have things equated. Don't treat people differently just because it's free in one case and they paid you $50 in the other. If my grandma bakes me brownies, is she compensating me now? So is grandma going to get kicked out because there's a remuneration, right? And now it's a commercial transaction? Makes no sense. So we've been fighting this, and very briefly to begin and end the legislative history of it, we asked Representative John Notwell to run a bill, because he's a very techie kind of guy, property rights minded guy. We said, here's this issue. So he ran a bill, and the League of Cities and Towns. If you don't know what the League of Cities and Towns is anyone from Highland listening? They were a member, and then they weren't. And are they a member of the League now? I can't remember if they were out for a while. But the League of Cities and Towns, oh yeah, Tim would know. Are you guys a member right now? Okay, I'm sorry. So the League of Cities and Towns is a very progressive, big government coalition of city bureaucrats. They are funded by your taxpayer dollars to advocate in favor of what the city bureaucrats want to do, which means when we go and propose up at Capitol Hill, here's this bill we want to do to legalize property owners sharing their homes, the League of Cities and Towns, the president told the legislator that they would consider this nuclear war. They would bring up every mayor, every city councilor, they would put out the word, and that would be their top priority to kill that, because it goes against what they perceive to be local control. Now, my friends who are 10th Amendment supporters like to use the term local control, and I don't. I used to. But then I came to realize that local control is not local liberty. It's not local property rights. It's not local freedom. It's local control. It is the tyranny of the majority in your neighborhood. And I don't like tyranny anywhere. So the issue is that these city bureaucrats with your own taxpayer dollars are going up to the Capitol and funding very competent lobbyists to advocate against your interests. You are funding the very tyranny that oppresses you. It's a sad arrangement. So that's the opposition, is these cities don't want the legislature. So the legislature on many other issues has said, statewide, we're going to fix this. Breastfeeding is an example, right? In cities it used to be a patchwork of policies, and the legislature came in and said, no, in any place that a woman has the right to publicly be, she has the right to breastfeed. We're taking that power away from the cities. Now here's the difference. Our opponents, I probably am over time, so 90 seconds. The opponents will say, oh, we don't like the federal government coming in and telling us what to do, and now the state's coming in and telling the cities what to do. And I always do, like, what's the meme where it's Captain Picard, and he's just like, maybe none of you know what a meme is, or the Captain Picard one, but it's a funny image on Facebook, and it's really good. Anyways, so I shake my head because the states created the federal government, and Bliss is nodding his head, of course, right? We delegated as states the power to create the federal government. And then the states, with the exception of charter cities, which is another beast, and we only have one in the state of Utah, and it's not really a charter city, but every city pretty much in Utah is what's called a political subdivision of the state. So the power is delegated from us up to the state, from the state to the feds, and then from the state down to the cities. The state is who gets delegated or what gets delegated our authority. That makes sense? So the state has every right to tell the cities, no, knock it off. We're taking back that authority that you were given. But the cities are trying to say, oh, you 10th Amendment legislators, you don't like the feds, and so no. They're completely wrong, right? Cities have no inherent authority to have local control and to dictate what's going to be done. And so when we see so many cities around the entire state violating property rights, we think our position is that it's very appropriate for the legislature to come in and rescind that authority and fix it statewide and say, no, you're going to be able to do this. And so there will probably be legislation this session. There's no bill number yet, and we're trying to figure out what the right approach is, because the League has many people who will come up to the Capitol. They consider it nuclear war, and so we're trying to be a little bit more strategic and work our way in. But this is a huge issue. We interviewed, in my last 15 seconds, we interviewed one woman that was crying. We're going to release a video in a few weeks on this. She was crying because for the first time in her life, or not in her life, excuse me, for the first time in several years, she was self-sufficient. She'd been a dependent on her own children. Her husband died. They had horrible financial problems. Her children were financing her life, and she felt ashamed. She was able to start renting her property out because her children had all moved out. She had the space. And with that income, she was self-sustaining. Only problem is, it's illegal to do in her city. So that's the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.